Hi, Michael. Welcome and many thanks for taking the time to do this interview. Since many years, I thought doing an interview with you, and now it takes place, and I'm very happy to have you here. I know that you are doing Qigong, you're doing martial arts, different styles, Tai Chi Chuan, for example, with a background, and you're doing Reiki. You have written books about this, interesting books, very interesting books, deep books. And so I thought doing an interview with you and trying to understand better who is this guy who wrote these books and does all these things, and giving you an opportunity to bring the philosophies together to let us know what is the crystallization point, what is the sun within you, where all these different things like Qigong and Reiki are orbiting around. So, how did you come to the philosophy behind these arts you do?
Okay, well, Walter, that's an excellent question. First of all, I want to thank you so much for this opportunity. I know, as you and I have talked, when I was a new Reiki student, I've been with Reiki for I don't know, about 35 years now. There weren't many books back in the day. I, of course, read many of your books and looked at you as a great pioneer and loved your spirit and your philosophy. I like that you're a traditionalist, but you also are creative and you like to learn new things and create new things, but you're still traditional, which is I think is wonderful. So it's great to be here. I mean, it's a wonderful opportunity. So thank you so much. Well, as far as me, first of all, I mean, it starts from it's a karma thing, or call it fate, whatever you like to call it. My parents were both child prodigy artists. So as children, they were very advanced already as artists. My father went to a prestigious art school when he was 12. In fact, he won a contest against adults on TV in the 50s. It was an art TV show contest type of thing, like America's Got Talent, right? But art. So he's 12 years old with all the adults doing the classical art curriculum. My mother was even more talented. She grew up in a on a farm in South Dakota with nine brothers and sisters. She was the odd one. No electricity, no heat, right? But here she is, this great artist. So they created programs for her at the local college. Anyway, long story short, I was raised in an atmosphere of creativity. The house was like an art gallery with art under construction. And, if my mother painted the ceiling, that was art. So it was just natural. Now, I'm not so much a visual artist, but I love to read and write as long as I mean, before I was in school, I was reading and writing. Um, I was way ahead with my skills with reading and writing. So I started to read my mother had books from college on art philosophy, Asian philosophy. A book that made a huge impression on me early on was Khalil Gibran, The Prophet. I'm sure you're familiar.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. Great author.
It's just such a classic. And I must say, as a 7 and 8 year old, I didn't understand all of it, but it touched me very deeply.
Yeah.
And then my father was interested in martial arts. My uncle, in fact, he was a student of Ed Parker's Kempo. And, I would see it in TV shows and movies, of course, Bruce Lee and David Carradine, the Kung Fu. So it was just something I was always fascinated with. Now, growing up, I did not have the opportunity to train formally. I wanted to. So I learned from books, whatever books I could. There was no internet, of course. So whatever books I could find. My mother got me two books that had pictures so I could actually try to learn from the pictures. And in fact, one day she gave me a test. It was quite a scene. I was 12 years old, and the book had a belt rank system up to black belt. So I used my sister as a partner. At any rate, so I was fascinated with the philosophy of the arts and the practice from when I was born. And I had a very challenging upbringing. And by the time I was 20, I had arthritis, I had high blood pressure. I was not in a good not in a positive mental state, let's say. And I
Mm.
needed something to get me going the right way. My mother had passed away. I had to leave school, and it was very challenging. So I remembered my love of martial arts, and I figured, well, now's the time to find a teacher and to get going to help myself, basically. I needed healing. So I did some reading, and I found that Tai Chi, which is actually Most people don't know. It's actually a form of Chinese martial arts that nowadays most people practice for health reasons because it's such a great system for mind and body to be healthy and in balance. So I searched for a year. It took me a year to find a teacher. There was no school in the phone book. There was much less than now. And in the meantime, I read books and, again, studied as I could. So long story short, I was very lucky to meet a great teacher who had traveled all over the world. He was born in Okinawa, though he wasn't an American. He lived with a very famous teacher by the name of Dr. Daniel K. Pai, who was a Hawaiian who himself had been adopted by a Chinese Shaolin grandmaster. He was very notable in the 20th century. So I was lucky to meet this teacher and began training in Tai Chi, and then I got into Filipino martial arts, his Shaolin Kung Fu program. I was basically 24/7. I would work a job like delivering water during the day or something simple where I got exercise, and then I had the rest of the time after and on the weekends to train. And I'd be the first one at the school, the last one to leave. Anyway, eventually, my teacher, who had been involved his entire life since he was a child, and never sold out. He never had a commercial, what we call a Mick Dojo. Now, he's very talented himself as a photographer, but he wanted to change careers and go into the corporate sector just because he had children. And so I took over running the school. Long story short, I became chief instructor under him. I lived at my school. Around this time, I started publishing. And this is when I first found Reiki, about 10 years into my training. And quite honestly, I read a book by Barbara Weber Ray. If you remember Barbara Weber Ray,
I do.
one of Takada's top disciples. And it was very new agey. She was dressed in flowing white robes. I'll be honest with you, I was a little skeptical because in my understanding, to be able to learn to use healing energy wasn't as simple as we know it is with Reiki. It's a gift that anyone can receive, pretty much. But I was skeptical, but I was open minded. And there was it was just when integrative medicine was becoming more mainstream here in the United States in the early 90s, mid 90s. So there was a hospital that had an integrative healing arts day, free Reiki sessions, Tai Chi. They had a flute player. They had food. I figured, well, let me go. I'll meet some people. I'll try this Reiki thing out. And, we'll see. Now, so this was my first introduction to Reiki. I talk about it in my book, The Seven Jewels of Reiki. I went from skeptic to, now I had been practicing daily Qigong, meditation, martial arts, eating well. I was, my energy system was being very well cleansed, from all this. So I drove in the parking lot, and it was one of those moments where I had a feeling like something momentous is about to happen, like tapping me on the shoulder. So I walked in there. I could sense there were 6 Reiki teachers that had been doing Reiki sessions for a couple hours already in a conference room. So I sat down to register myself for a Reiki session, and this is how it wasn't a suggestion because I was about 28 years old at the time. The young lady registering us was a very attractive, blonde girl in her 20s. I was thinking about talking to her. I wasn't thinking about Reiki. Well, the right side of my body facing this room got warm and tingly from a distance. And I was like, what on earth? And I asked her, and she responded, well, that's why I'm sitting so close. One of her mother was one of the Reiki teachers. So now I was really like, whoa, okay, this is amazing. And I went in and had a half-hour Reiki session, which was so powerful. It was one of those sessions where I lost track of time and space. It was like I was in a vision and a dream. And then after the session, I actually had to sit down for an hour. It was so powerful. I just sat on the floor and watched everything. And then I drove away. At the time, I was drinking 20 cups of black coffee a day. I didn't need any coffee. I was healthy. It was just a bad habit. All day I'm drinking a coffee. Well, I went in there being skeptical. I drove away. I quit drinking coffee on the spot and had no withdrawal symptoms. So that was my amazing introduction to Reiki. And then shortly after this, I contacted the people that put this on and took my level 1 course. That was through the lineage of John Harvey Gray, who was one of Takada's top disciples. And he was the first Reiki teacher in my region of the United States. back then, most of the people around here trained with him or one of his students. And then I went on from there. I could keep talking and talking, but if you have any questions.
I find this extremely interesting because my experiences when people talk about how their, I call it a river, how their river was flowing towards the ocean, then you can learn so much about it. And I really appreciate you opening up so much to our audience and telling about your own path. So, what was it? What fascinated you with Reiki? What was what really got you into being a Reiki teacher? What
Okay.
motivated you?
Yeah, well, it was, see, I had already been practicing Tai Chi, Qigong, Shaolin Kung Fu, Filipino martial arts. I also learned transcendental meditation. I was a student of Yoga Ananda through the Self Realization Fellowship. I embraced the whole philosophy of the arts. Um, Not everyone knows that the Chinese martial arts are highly influenced by India through Buddhism, as you know, Bodhidharma. So I got into all of this. I mean, this was my path in life that I was born into. Somehow, this American guy, so, but see, so it had helped me immensely. But the Reiki was so powerful to help me. Again, I had abuse as a background as a child, and that can be buried to where you
Mhm.
don't even remember it happened. So these started to come up, and I went through a healing process my first year as a Reiki student. That was like the first attunement I had in class. I felt great. After the Reiki level 2, my whole world, I'm a guy that I can be very passive and let people push me around because I want to be nice. I don't want to hurt people. So people would take advantage, and they talk to you rude, and I wasn't defending myself. So I started, that all started to change. If people were talking to me on the phone and being rude for no reason, I would literally just tell them, well, you know what? When you feel like being respectful, why don't you call me back, and hang up on them? My whole life was changing. I was changing very quickly. So I was amazed by this because Reiki is, it can be potentially so powerful. So I was going through changes very fast, and I wanted to share it with people. I was already teaching, these other arts. To me, it all fits into one puzzle. It's all part of one puzzle of healing, one facet, like a jewel. My teacher would talk about the arts being a jewel with limitless facets, or like the lotus with the 10,000 petals. So the
Mhm.
Reiki, to me, Reiki is a form of shamanic and spiritual Qigong.
Sure,
That's what it is. I mean,
that's
it's
what it
it's
is. Yeah.
healing energy at a very high level, and also at an essential level. So to me, I'm still amazed that not everyone knows about it, and I want everyone to know about it. I integrate it into my work with seniors. I work with seniors. I work with people with brain injuries for years. I always integrate it into everything I do if I can. I don't force it on people, but I am who I am, and I know the potential of it. So that's essentially right. So it helped me so much that I want to share it.
Sure. And you wrote a really good, interesting book about that. You just talked about this a little bit, but I would love you to talk more about your Reiki book. Why do you think it's important for people to read about Reiki in general and read your book in specifics?
Well, listen, thank you. Okay, so there's so many books on Reiki now, right? It went from being just a few to now every day there's hundreds more, maybe thousands more. What makes mine different is that I had a traditional background. I have a traditional background in Tai Chi, Qigong, meditation from a teacher that had wonderful programs of training. You had to try out to become a student at my teacher's school. You couldn't just join. It was like an elite university of the arts. And it wasn't to be exclusive. He wanted people that were going to be more serious about it, and we're going to basically, you had to practice. If you didn't practice, then you know go somewhere else. No offense, but and it didn't mean anything bad. But it was very serious what we were doing. He was putting a lot of effort in. So I had a lot of background there, and then along the way through my martial arts, I met someone who essentially is on a comparable level with Usui. His name is Dr. Meng Ji. Now, Dr. G, this is him here conducting a blessing ceremony at my school. This is me with him. He's from Burma. He came here in 1950. Burma was destroyed in World War II. His family was very prominent in Burmese society. His father was a spiritual leader, a martial arts teacher. They were of the warrior caste, which is the military and political leaders of the nation. Burma traditionally has a caste system. And so he had an unusual education in martial arts, spiritual arts, healing arts. He himself suffered tragedy way beyond anything I did during World War II. He came here in 1950 with the mission from his father to preserve Burmese arts and culture. So
Mm-hmm.
now in 2001, the spring of 2001, before 9/11 here, I met him at a martial arts clinic. My teacher gave him the highest endorsement I had ever. He doesn't put people down, but he doesn't necessarily praise either. So the praise he gave Dr. G, I was like, I'm going to have to meet this man because I never heard this before. Not for anyone alive. You know, people of the past like Ueshiba, the Aikido founder, people like
Yeah.
this, right?
Yeah.
So I went to meet Dr. G. He was 76. It was in upstate New York. It was martial arts teachers from around the country, a few students, but mostly teachers. And he was good friends with my teacher's teacher and my teacher going back, decades. So when I met him, I was respectful, like in the old way. I bowed to him. I gave him gifts, and I became his buddy after that. He put his arm around me. He used me as his partner all day, and then began teaching me on the spot. He's like, when I met him, it was like a living human Yoda. He has a hand
Oh,
carved cane, a hand carved pipe. Now the thing is, he's a general in U.S. Black Ops Special Forces, on top of being a professor and a healing arts expert. So the pipe and the cane, they're for his enjoyment, but it's also he's like a ninja. It's like if he ever needed to protect himself, you see, he's very wise. So at any rate, and then at the end of this, where he's 76 years old, he was knocking us around for 6 hours. Like he's
God.
very for his size, he's very powerful, like way more powerful than I am. That's why he's a living legend in martial arts. He was unbelievable when he was younger. And at the end, for the last half an hour, we were using a not a stick, not quite a staff, but like a Joe stick, like a 3 foot tall stick. It
Mm-hmm.
was
Mm-hmm.
it was actually a defense system from the Korean conflict that the UN peacekeepers. Dr. G was one of the original UN peacekeepers back when they carried no firearms. They had these sticks. So he preserved the system and was teaching it to us. At the end, we did all this yoga and healing arts and energy work with the sticks. And that's when
Wow.
it became evident that this man is unbelievable in his knowledge. I didn't know that he had all the spiritual and healing arts knowledge. So I asked him to come to my school to teach, and he agreed. And then he had then later, one of his top students called me and said, Dr. G wants to know what you want him to teach. And I said, well, anything he wants. I was being respectful. And she said, no, you have to tell him. So I said, wow, boy, I get to pick. So I asked her to tell him that I would like him to teach aspects of his knowledge to enhance our Reiki arts, because I
Yeah.
already had great martial arts. Now, Dr. G and his family have preserved documents that are so old, they're written on palm fronds with gold ink.
Mm-hmm.
He's a
Mm-hmm.
scholar. His father was a scholar. So my education, now, he refers to Reiki as coming from his country, but of course he means spiritual energy arts, or ancient in Burma. Um, he knows about Usui's Reiki because he actually took training in Usui's Reiki when he was living in Ohio. He was a professor at Ohio State for like 40 years, and he taught at Harvard for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So he began teaching me aspects of his knowledge. Um, Specifically, there's something he calls Min Zin, which is essentially a very high level form of spiritual qigong, yoga, and meditation and energy work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Very unique to Burma because it's been influenced by India, China, Tibet. That's Burma's in between all those cultures. And So I began becoming mentored by him. He would visit my school. I'd go to see him. He'd write. He'd call me. And so that's where my Reiki system, I had learned a whole host of Usui Reiki styles on my own. Hayashi Reiki, Takata Reiki, Karuna Reiki, William Rand's Usui Tibetan Reiki, Essential Reiki, Reiki Jin Kido, Budo Enersense. But it was training with Dr. G that is when I started developing my own Reiki system, because it was specifically to kind of like you've done with your Rainbow Reiki. There's more to it than just what you learned in your Reiki class. A lot
Definitely.
more, right? Much more, right? So that's essentially where my Reiki system. That's what makes it unique. Is it's the Burmese Reiki, the Japanese Reiki, and the Usui Reiki kind of all combined in a coherent fashion. I hope it's all outlined. This book especially has the entire curriculum for level 1 and 2.
Hmm, hmm.
Um, so here we are.
But you wrote this book about first and second degree content, but you also wrote this Jules book about Reiki. Would you like to talk a little bit about that too?
Sure, yes. Okay, so the 7 jewels of Reiki, right? Okay. So what I did was, due to my background in qigong and meditation, and then a whole variety of styles of Reiki, I started to think, well, what is it? What is Usui's Reiki? And I distilled it down to 8 main areas. There's the It's a huge part of Japanese culture, as you know, the Gasho Mudra, which as Americans, I think of this as I'm going to say a prayer. But this is a yoga posture and a yoga gesture that is very prevalent in Japan. And of course, this was part of what Usui did. Um, and then also studying Usui's own words in the Reiki Ryoho Hikai, the questions and answers. He talks about the most important aspects of his art. So there was the 3 pillars of Reiki that your friend Mr. Petter talked about. So essentially, the 7 jewels of Reiki, I just expanded that a little. So there's the 3 pillars, but it's also the Gasho, the Reiju, the attunement, the Reiki Qigong, which was something that they did in Japan. They had different names for it, but they practiced meditation and energy work. The symbols, the mantras, the names, and the visual symbol, and then the sound, the mantra. So I just distilled the 7 main elements, and then my Reiki art, everything that I'm doing fits into there somehow. So even though
I
I may have
see.
learned elements from Dr. G, like he taught me rare Reiki symbols from his Burmese tradition, well, Usui had symbols. I didn't make these symbols up. Dr. G, these are ancient symbols that his traditions worked with. Um, so that's the 7 jewels of Reiki, is just kind of talking about, in a coherent sense, what is Usui Reiki Ryoho. Um, Now, originally, this was one book, but the publisher, Lotus Press, decided that a 500 page or 450 would be a little too much for most people.
I see. I understand you so well.
Yeah, so I split it into two. So this was the first part of the book was the overview of Reiki, of what
Mhm.
is it, the 7 jewels, each element, and the significance of it. And then here is the curriculum, where I go much more into depth into the principles and curriculum. Now, I also, again, Reiki is an art of compassion. You could say it's the compassion and love of the universe in an energy form that all life can benefit from, all creation, really. Um, but that maybe doesn't help people to say that's so amorphous. Now, when you receive a Reiki session, you feel it. But for Americans or Westerners or anyone that's not raised in a culture to understand about energy, qigong, where I live, they would not too long ago. This was voodoo. It was witchcraft. It was very
Yeah, yeah,
superstitious.
yeah.
So I came up with some principles as well, 4 main principles to help someone understand how Reiki works. Number one is everything is energy. Now, we
Right.
already know this scientifically, right? E equals MC squared. But
Of
people
course.
still don't. We don't. Not everyone's walking around all day with this consciousness that my phone is energy. There's an energy beam. The atoms and molecules are made of energy, right? We just don't think that way all the time. But the fact is, everything is energy. I read an amazing quote from a physicist, which I guess is true. I'm not a physicist, but if you were to take all the matter on planet Earth and put it together, it would fit on the top of a pin.
Oh
It's
God.
very little matter. Everything's energy. We just sense it as matter. Now we
Mm-hmm.
also sense energy. We just don't. We're not thinking this way. But the sunlight is energy. If I have a stomach ache, it's energy. When I go to the bathroom, it's energy. When I'm happy, it's energy. So that's rule number one: is everything is energy. It's not
Mm-hmm.
superstitious. Reiki is not hoodoo voodoo. It's an energy healing art, a spiritual energy healing art. Then number two is that, and again, Western culture is based on breaking things into parts. And there are
Yeah.
people with PhDs that can describe this much more than I can. I was on an academic path and that got changed and I got into what I'm doing now. But Asian culture looks at how it all fits together, you know? So my second principle is all is one is all, we are one. Everything is a we're not separate from anything. We're breathing molecules of every life that ever lived on Earth. We have stardust. Everything is in the universe is recycled and it transforms, but it doesn't go away really. And it's all a giant. I experience the Earth and us and the universe is all one giant being.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the principle number two: is that it's not as separate as it might seem. Everything's energetic. We don't end where our skin ends, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
energy, and our energy interacts with all the energies around us and
Yeah,
within us.
resonance.
So then principle three was this is from Qigong: spirit commands energy. So the highest, purest forms of energy give order to the lower forms. And this is where
Mm-hmm.
Reiki is so helpful because Reiki is an aspect of the pure, non dualistic energy of the source.
Mm-hmm.
However, one wants to think of that as God, the Buddha realm, but the Reiki is that energy that's coming to us from the. It's like the sunlight and the heat and all the energy from the sun. That's a part of the sun, and it's nurturing us. Without the sun, there wouldn't be any. We wouldn't be here. So the Reiki's a part of spirit that's nurturing everything. And it brings order because it's so pure, it's so perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So spirit commands energy. I didn't invent that. That's from Qigong, but it's
Mm-hmm.
important to understand. It helps us to understand how Reiki works. And then, most important, um, I put it in again more of a Western. Thy will be done, not mine.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about my ego. It's not. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
as a Reiki person, we're a vessel. I work with the Reiki, but I don't really control it. I don't control it. It's best for me to get out of the way and let it flow, and then I listen and follow it.
Exactly.
So I put it. So those are four principles I distilled just to help people understand how this works.
Wonderful. Wonderful work.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for doing that. And I'm curious about, for many people, martial arts and Reiki are two different
Ah,
things. Not for me, not for me, as you know. So how do you bring the both together? And I know that you have a very broad and deep
yeah,
philosophical background which unites both. Would you please
yeah.
explain a little bit about that?
Well, that's one of my goals, and it's not been easy.
Oh,
In the
yeah.
past, I've had to print two different cards and two different brochures because the martial arts people don't necessarily want to know about Reiki. They think that's for sissies. And the Reiki people think, oh, you're a scary, violent person. And it's like, no, no, no. The Shaolin, they were monks. It was part of their path to enlightenment. That's what martial arts was like yoga to them, but they had the need to protect themselves. We all have the right to protect ourselves. So, see, I was taught martial arts. This is what my teacher, I asked him, what is the purpose of Tai Chi? My teacher, again, he's lived with his teacher. He's at a very high level. He told me the first level is to redirect and neutralize negativity of word, thought, or deed.
Hmm.
Okay. So someone's trying to punch me. That's negative energy. I don't want them doing that. Or it could be verbal. It could be someone's grab. It could be within me. I'm having bad thoughts and bad habits and who knows what. I need to redirect it. I need to neutralize it somehow. So, and then the higher level is to, he said, act previous, is don't let it manifest. Get to the seeds level, and deal with it there. So it's a spiritual art. The martial arts that now I learned temple and family styles that are spiritual arts. There's martial sports, MMA and boxing. Even there, if you have respect, right, they'll shake hands and nod, and as long as you're having some kind of respect, it's not just about violence. Now it's very tough, right? People that train in some martial arts, it's not for everyone. Real martial arts, but many of the greatest warriors were also very spiritual, and they helped people.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
Masoyama, the famous karate grandmaster who was undefeated, he was he taught spiritual principles. He wore a white gi that symbolized purity. He was not someone to mess with, but he was also, he wasn't just out there causing mayhem. So, and then the Reiki art in reverse, listen, it doesn't matter who you are and how tough, we all have the need for healing. We all have the need for compassion and love. Um, so they're both like, it's like yin and yang. The Tai Chi symbol, yin and yang don't exist on their own, right? They're in a relationship always changing. And there's so many levels to it. So yeah, so to me it was natural because of how I learned. And I hope to bring this more, to be able to. The arts are so new in my culture. I'll just say me. I don't know in Germany, but I would think Western culture in general, it's much newer than in Asia. So the idea that it's a whole system, we're each going to be drawn to different aspects in different areas. But yeah, I hope some of that made sense.
Absolutely. And I appreciate very much that you talked about that. And I think that this is a unique combination because for me, what lacks in, let's say, Western world Reiki is that people don't really make proof of what they can do. While in martial arts, you go into a ring with someone and you know what you can do and you know what they can do.
Right.
So I think that what you're doing and the thought work you do and did is helping people to get a more practical access to Reiki. Is it this right?
Well, if I may, you know, Reiki comes from Japan.
Yeah,
And Usui had thousands of students, but only a few teachers.
right.
And in fact, he had a system of levels, almost like in a martial art with belts. And it was more spiritual. It wasn't like, okay, I can lift my leg this high and I can do 1,000 kicks. But you had to live it in your life. You had to show talent. It had to be coming from your heart. You had to be sincere. And then my understanding is they had, if you didn't reach a certain level of skill, you weren't going to be a full Shihan teacher. In other words, the Reiji, the sensing the problems and issues a person might have in their energy system, the Reiji, that was my understanding. If you didn't achieve that level, you weren't a teacher. Now,
Hmm.
we don't need to
Hmm.
be that strict nowadays, but I wouldn't call someone who can pass an attunement necessarily a Reiki master. Okay,
Right.
you can give someone an attunement. I could show someone in one, it doesn't take long to learn how to. If I give someone a Reiki attunement and then show them the first time I did a Reiki attunement, I followed along with a book. I wasn't a master of Reiki.
Yeah.
So it needs to be more balanced. Like, and I don't want to criticize, but I do want to say that what you're saying is true. Just because you get a piece of paper and you paid for something, you don't know how many people, Walter, I talk to and say, well, I've written some books and I have this background. And they literally go like this: I'm a Reiki master. Oh, okay, great. So they've missed the point.
Yes,
You're a student.
exactly.
You still learn. You're still growing, right? I am. So right. There needs to be more balance and understanding. So I generally like to use the term I'm a Reiki teacher, I'm a Reiki Shihan, I'm a sensei, which is more realistic. At any rate. So yeah, no, there's definitely you're right about that. Exactly. What can you really do? What are you really doing? And that's not to criticize. If we learn and we just help ourselves and our family and our friends and our pets, that's beautiful. You know.
Exactly. I think this is one of the major aspects of Reiki to help ourselves, to help friends and family and pets to have a good life, to have a productive life and feel well. And I think that this is the aim or one aim of Qigong too. And what I see from what you're doing, you bring also together Reiki and Qigong. Would you
Mm-hmm.
like to tell us a little bit
Yeah,
about that? That's so
sure.
interesting.
Well, first of all, I had been practicing Tai Chi and Qigong and meditation daily for 10 years.
Mm,
When I had my first Reiki attunement, it immediately improved my abilities, I guess I'd say. I could feel my energy system was being healed. So I could feel energy moving through me in all kinds of new ways. Um, and it taught me a lot. I was too intentional before. I was trying to force, like make the energy flow. And the Reiki, where I learned to more let go and just let it happen, really taught me some wonderful lessons. So I think Reiki could help people that do more traditional Qigong. It's almost like it's not a shortcut, but it's so simple and wonderful. Reiki's very high level, but also simple at the same time. And that's how nature is, right? We don't think about it, but every day the sun rises, the sun sets, the earth is spinning, gravity's working. We don't fly off. My stomach regenerates every month. I don't even notice it, right? So Reiki's at that level of being so advanced that it seems like it's nothing. That's how I
mhm,
think of it. Um, so so right there, the Reiki helps the Qigong, but then also having some training in. Now, when we say Qigong, there's different kinds. There's martial arts Qigong, there's health Qigong, there's spiritual Qigong, and they may share aspects and they may be quite different. But mostly people are talking about Qigong for health.
mhm.
And Tai Chi is also that. Tai Chi is Qigong and it's a martial art. It's both. Um, Mostly now people are doing it for health. Um, but so the qigong, because you're working with your body more usually, stretching and breathing and moving, and Reiki's great, but it's not really exercise so much. So
No.
so doing some tai chi and some qigong with the Reiki is a great combination, or adding Reiki into that, or like people who do yoga, like hatha yoga. Same thing. You're getting now. I will say that my teacher, Dr. G, he's very advanced. Dr. G, I want to share. He was His Holiness the Dalai Lama's chief security consultant in North America for many years, and his student. So he wasn't just a bodyguard, but he was responsible for the security for the Dalai Lama's whole retinue everywhere they went. And you have to be in tune. He had 3 interviews with him, and then you become like a student. So Dr. G is very advanced, and he commented that the combination of Tai Chi, Qigong, and Reiki is very, very special. They each have their own kind of focus, but they work to go together so well, and it's endless. I mean, you could practice forever. So yeah, so I think they really go well together. Again, like yin and yang. If someone practices Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, martial arts, I highly recommend Reiki because you're going to get a sensation for Qi and energy probably like you never had before. And then for people doing Reiki, if you want something more physical, and also it'll help you to teach you about your Reiki because when you're doing various exercises to learn how to extend your energy and circulate it, that only helps the Reiki. You know,
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
you know.
Yeah, that's what I think. And I think that it's also helping very much to develop a deeper understanding, a philosophical understanding of the process of life when you do Qigong, and that might help people also to understand the deepness, the depths of Reiki. What is your experience in that? May I ask?
Okay, the how what was it again now?
Well, that the practice of Qigong gives you gives you a better understanding of the depths of Reiki, what Reiki is doing for you. I
Okay, yeah.
guess.
Yes, I would agree with that because that was my experience when I first had my first Reiki attunement and learned the first, the teacher recommended practice every day for at least the next month. So at first I didn't. It was so subtle. I didn't. I could sense something was happening, and then after working with it for a couple of weeks, I could feel it more and more. Um, and so yes, and then I had sensations when I'm working with my Tai Chi and Qigong of a deeper level of energy flowing. So yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Um,
Hmm.
they help each other in many ways.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it's
Hmm.
hard to say exact. Depending on the person, it's going to do different things. But the Reiki gives you an immediate access to this healing energy, and that has a healing effect on the energy system, which is only going to be good for people doing qigong and tai chi. And then the tai chi and the qigong, there's typically more form to it. There's
Hmm.
more
Hmm.
structure. Again, many, Reiki, typically nowadays, people are learning symbols and hand positions and some, maybe distance healing and how to do an attunement, but maybe not too much more than that.
Right.
So having Tai Chi and Qigong, there's just now in my Reiki system, I actually have a whole system of Qigong that goes with the Reiki. I call it, it's in Japanese, it's Reikiko, Reiki Qigong. Some of this I learned from Dr. G. He taught it to us with the intention to help the Reiki. So it wasn't just picked out of nowhere. And then also, as you know, over the years, some Japanese Reiki teachers have shared some traditional methods that, for one reason or another, didn't get transmitted too well. The Gasho breathing meditation and various others, which I'm sure you're aware of. Um, so yeah, no, they definitely help each other and they bring depth to each other for sure.
My impression is that when people start to study martial arts, they are usually very aggressive,
Right,
very emotional,
right,
easy
right, right.
to stir.
Yeah,
And when they do this for, let's say, 10 years, they become very amicable, very nice and
right.
kind people. And that's something which, in my understanding, is very much the opposite of what outsiders who don't do martial arts think about martial artists. Would you like to tell us a little bit from the inside of this process, of this inner growth towards the heart, which when you do martial arts in the right
Well,
way?
mine is unusual because I started martial arts training to heal myself.
Oh, I see.
And
Mm.
also, my instructor did not emphasize, using negative emotions. I was
Great.
taught a Shaolin spiritual system,
Hmm.
and it certainly is very effective. His teacher, and I mean, it definitely works. And you might have some fear when you're actually fighting with someone, but we were taught how to not let that control us, and that, again, anger, and we didn't have any of that. I mean, other than my personally, you might bring into it. But yeah, many martial arts, right? They're taught more as like a military pugilistic thing, and there may be more of that. But if someone stays with it and they have a good teacher, then it becomes more of their path in life, and it's not about hurting people. I mean,
No, not at all.
that's no, no. That's, I mean, if you need to protect yourself, listen, protecting could be just not going somewhere where you might get into trouble.
Right.
Avoidance. So yeah, but yeah, right, there can be a lot of fear and negative uh, aspects to training in martial arts. Again, if the teacher is not teaching in a traditional way, traditional teachers didn't. You're going to bow. You're going to your discipline is to improve yourself and make a positive impact in the world.
Yeah,
So,
and I remember what you told us about your Tai Chi Chuan teacher, who said that second stage is about avoiding
right.
situations which would develop into being aggressive.
Or being able to respond to them before they really manifest.
Exact, yeah. Isn't that great?
So
Isn't that
I
genial?
could give you an example. Um, I used to have, again, when I was learning, I would take jobs where I get some exercise. I was on my own. I didn't have to deal with a lot of drama at work because all I wanted to do was train, really, and practice and help my teacher run the school. So I had a job. I was working for a home care company as a delivery guy and technician, hospital beds, wheelchairs, all this kind of stuff. So I'd go all over the three-state area, sometimes in areas that were not real safe, but I had to go there. So I remember being in an area that I could see was controlled by gangs. There was markings, and I was crossing a bridge, which I guess was in between two territories. I don't know. So I see this guy approaching me, and okay, right. So I just figure I'm going to be friendly. I'm not going to be afraid. That's number one. Be friendly. Yeah, hey, how you doing? And he wanted to borrow some money. I didn't have any money. Sorry, man. I showed him. I'm not walking around with money in this place. And then he wanted a light for a cigarette, and I happened to have a match or a lighter on me, so I lit his cigarette, and I was very friendly. And he's like, "Oh, you don't have any money? You light my cigarette? You're a nice guy. All right, go ahead." So the way I approached it was to avoid a problem by not being afraid. I just treated him like a human being, and I was fine. And I've had
Great.
that. I've had some crazy ups and downs in my life where I've lived in places that had crime, and I always approach it as I just talk to everyone as a person, and I live right down the street, and I make a joke about it, and they don't. It never accelerates into anything violent because half the time they're just goofing around with you. And anyway, I've been lucky. I've never really. Only one time I had to use my arts where I couldn't avoid it, and luckily I had really good martial arts training, and I was able to get out of that without hurting the person or me getting hurt. Someone
Great.
a crap a Anyway, I could tell the story if you like. It was quite fascinating.
Yes,
It
please
doesn't
do.
really.
Please do.
Okay. So, luckily, again, I had great martial arts training, but we were never taught to be aggressive or, I would let people hit me before I'd hit them back. Even then, if they hit me, as long as I'm not hurt, I don't care. Well, I was making a delivery. Again, I'm working for this home care company. I was a lot younger. At the time, I used to carry three weapons at all times. One would go through a metal detector. I had a knotted piece of rope that you'd fold it a certain way and keep it in your pocket so you could take it out. And you basically had like a whip and you could do things with it. And then I had a knife that I carried that was legal. And I had a special keychain. So now, so I thought I was Mr. Tough Guy. I'm ready for anything. Well, I'm at this. I was really kind of clueless. I stopped at a stoplight on a beautiful day in the summer. I had my windows down. I wasn't paying any attention. I'm listening to music, and it was not in a great area. And I was about 28 years old at the time. I didn't shave until I was about 35. I've always been very baby faced. If I went to buy alcohol, they would ask me for my ID, even when I was 49 years old. No
Oh
kidding.
gosh.
I looked really young and kind of. So here I am in this area. I look like I'm just. So this guy from the street hops in the car. He's got a windbreaker on, and he has his finger in the pocket. And he goes, "Give me $10." I started laughing at him. I go, "Get the hell out of my car! This will be your last day on earth." I thought I'd scare him. He wasn't afraid of me. I looked like some little kid that just crawled out of his mommy's womb. So he got very angry when I threatened him because he just wanted money to buy crack. He figured I'm a rich white guy. What's the big deal? Give me $10. I certainly wasn't wealthy. And so he pulled a knife on me. And here we are in the front seat of my car.
Oh.
And he was going to use it on me. Now, I was able to disarm him. Again, I learned very good martial arts, though you never want to be. I should have just gave him the $10. You see,
Mhm.
my instructor said you can always get more money. Just give them the money and then they leave. Well, I did the wrong thing. I figured I'm Mr. Tough Guy. I'm going to. So that was a great lesson. So anyway, I was able to disarm the guy and then I knocked him out and I opened the door. It was like the Terminator. I threw him out of my car and he woke up while I was throwing them out and grabbed the door and held on until at 30 miles an hour, he finally let go. 30 miles an hour is like 60 kilometers an hour,
Gosh.
right? So I learned a great lesson there. I should have just given him the money. At
Hmm.
any
Hmm.
rate, thank God I had good martial arts training and I got away. But that's an example of what not to do.
Hmm.
I didn't act previous.
I think we all had these kind of times in our lives where we learned some precious lessons
Right.
because otherwise we would not develop into who we are today.
Exactly. Yes.
So
Very
what?
true. I was lucky that, right, I was able to get that lesson, but
Yeah.
not be harmed. He wasn't really harmed either. So, yes.
Hmm. And what I think is very interesting is that you are doing these, I call it three things. In fact, I know it's much more than three, but three, let's say, big branches. The Reiki branch, which where you have studied with several schools, the Tai Chi branch, where you have studied with several people and martial arts, and then also the Qigong. And my understanding of, let's say, traditional martial arts is that each movement, on the one hand, is for self-defense, but at the same time, it's for helping you to be more healthy.
Yes.
Is this your
Yes.
understanding?
Chinese martial arts, all kinds, Tai Chi, different styles. First of all, they're all more alike than different. And Chinese martial arts influenced all the arts around China. So, for instance, karate, Japan, originally Okinawa to Japan, originally karate meant Chinese hand.
Yeah.
And you have Korean Tang Sudo, it's Tang, the Tang dynasty in China. So at any
Hmm.
rate, so yes, it's yogic, qigong, and martial all at once. So the postures you'll see in yoga, you'll see warrior posture,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
right? So in fact, this teacher I met, Dr. G, he was able to preserve ancient systems. He teaches a form of yoga. It's warrior yoga, danda yoga. It's yoga with the staff. And then he
Hmm.
says this is something the warriors would practice, stretching with the staff and all these different postures. And of course, in Shaolin, they did that. In the Tai Chi, the Taoist temples, they did that. So yeah, it's very fascinating that Tai Chi and Kung Fu it's a it's a spiritual art, it's a meditative art, it's a healing art, and you can protect yourself. Now, what's happened is in modern times, it's gotten split up because no one has, you know, originally it would take at least 10 to 20 years to get good knowledge and skill. No one has time like that now. Very few people. Um, so yeah. So in fact, Shaolin, there's something called the three treasures of Shaolin or the three jewels. Now, Shaolin, for people who don't know, that's where Zen Buddhism started. So Zen is the Japanese word, but in China it's Chan. In
Hmm.
India it's Dhyana. And
Hmm.
this is what the teacher Bodhidharma emphasized at the Shaolin Temple was this style of Buddhism, Zen. And then because Chinese martial arts are so prevalent, he combined the yogic arts with the martial arts. At any rate, and that was a long time ago, so it's very Chinese now. But originally, it was very influenced by Buddhism and India. But the three treasures of Shaolin is Shaolin martial arts. Is number one is the Zen, the meditation and the spiritual path of Zen. And then number two is Shaolin martial arts, and then I call it Shaolin Qigong or Shaolin healing arts. Some people say medicine, but in China, medicine is different than how I know Americans are thinking of it. So I
Yeah.
don't use that term because they're going to think medicine like pills and surgery,
Yeah.
right? Not herbs and qigong and Chinese medicine. They're not thinking of that. So I just call it like Shaolin healing arts.
I
And those
see.
are the
I
three
see.
treasures, and it goes together. Now, some of the monks would specialize in one or the other, right? Some would do it all. Me, I mean, I wasn't a monk in a temple, but I had great teachers, so I wanted to learn everything, and that's what I've been
That's
doing.
wonderful.
And then also, it was for me a path of self transformation. The
Hmm.
person I am now is nowhere near. I mean, I had a lot of potential, but I had so many fears and phobias and so much
Don't we all?
abuse. I mean, just to talk to someone like this and look at them was not really so possible at one
Mhm.
time.
I
So,
see. And that brought you a long way. And
yes.
well, once I was studying the roots of Usui Reiki before Usui, and I was in southern India, and I got to know someone who studied a family tradition of martial arts and healing,
Aha.
so which was going back to the 14th century.
Wow.
And in his family, everybody first had to learn martial arts. They call it Kalaripayat.
Yes. Yeah.
And it seems to me like what later appeared in China as Kung Fu,
Yeah.
in a way.
It looks a lot like it. It looks a
It
lot
looks
like
like,
it.
yeah, it does, it does. And he told me, my family philosophy is you first need to make peace with death and suffering,
Aha.
and then you can become a healer.
Okay.
So people had to learn, the women and the men first had to learn the martial arts, becoming master teachers, and then
Yes.
they studied healing. And he said what fascinated me until today, that one time he will develop his spiritual healing, and to do this, he will go to a holy mountain in springtime around Easter, pray to the great goddess, and don't eat for 3 weeks and meditate. And when he will come
Wow.
back, his hands will be healing.
Yes. Wow.
This was a family tradition from 14th century.
That's amazing.
That's amazing, isn't it? And so I think what you
Can I
do,
share something with you?
yeah, please.
That's something almost very exactly how my teacher's teacher taught. They used to teach courses on understanding peace through understanding violence.
Yeah, great, isn't this?
Because when you understand to hurt and be hurt and how easy that is, really, then you start to understand more about peace because you've
Hmm.
experienced it. So I'm sorry. So that
No,
sounds
wow,
amazing.
that's a wonderful insight you gave us. Thank you. I just want to ask you, in which way you understand this. Is there a similar idea you have? Because I think you are at the moment a living legend. You're doing these kind of things to bring all this together.
I'm far from a living legend, but
Oh, come
thank you
on.
so much. I have wonderful teachers from great traditions. Um, well, I would say, again, very simply, that this is something my instructor emphasized that when we train in martial arts properly, we're understanding the destructive side of it, but it's not about destruction. It's to help us grow as a person to
Exactly.
understand about peace.
Exactly.
So um, I could give you another example from my own. Um, this was I was at a gathering. It was my roommate and some people I knew at one time about 12 years ago. My roommate knew about me with martial arts. He had done some martial arts, and he was always talking. I would tell him, "Don't tell people, please, because it just causes trouble. Because now they want to test you out." So this guy was there. Now he was 10 years younger than me, all muscles with tattoos, bald head, an
Wow.
MMA guy, right? And he had, as a child, studied traditional martial arts, but he never went really far with it. So he was there trying to entertain everyone about how martial arts is no good. It's all garbage, and you have to do MMA is the real thing. It's the real thing. And then he kept throwing punches and kicks at me. Now he had really good control. It was a hot night, and they were coming like within a millimeter. I just ignored him. I enjoyed the breeze. Whatever. I got nothing to prove. So then he started insulting some very famous teachers who are passed away. That if he was to insult them to their face, they'd be teaching them a lesson real quick. It'd be like putting down Michael Jordan in basketball. Yeah,
Oh
you're
God.
going to beat him. You're going to beat him, right? So at that point, and then these teachers are related to my teacher and his teacher. So at that point, I figured, all right, I'm going to teach this guy some lessons. So we started to do like push hands, and there was a big fireplace like you'd see in a hunting cabin with all this stone. Now it was summer, so the fire wasn't lit. So I started using Tai Chi on him because he had no defense for that type of technique of yielding and redirecting. Everything was like smashing and, So and he had no root. He was very easily upset, overturned. So I just kept sending him flying full speed against the brick wall and evading him and then sending him flying. I could have done whatever I wanted to him. He almost, I hate to say it, made a mess in his pants. And then being a just not a very smart guy, then he says, "Oh, well, I could do more push-ups than you." Okay, great. So he went
So,
from thinking he was Mr. Superior Martial Arts to my point being that he had learned the wrong parts of
yeah,
martial arts, and my training, again, I have to thank my teacher. I didn't take it personal or get angry. It just became he needed a lesson and I gave him one.
yeah, exactly. I understand you. I think this is just the wrong way to practice martial arts if you just think about hurting people
Right.
and talking bad about people.
He was an egomaniac. He's a good teacher would have fixed him, somehow, or just
Hmm.
dismissed him. But one thing I want to get back to the Reiki because all of this that we're talking about, the Reiki art for all these people like this, if they would be open to it, would help them immensely, and it gives you an inner strength that
Yeah.
that maybe they don't have, that maybe they're looking for somehow. And
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
healing, the healing, would say the anger and all that. So again, that's you asked before about Reiki and Mars. It gets right to that. Reiki again, compassion and healing, and as you know, many times people will have Reiki session or give themselves Reiki, and they may start to become in tune with things that they never thought about or suppressed. Because it's starting a healing process.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
I forgot that I had been abused as a child in some ways. I put it away. And in my
Hmm.
Reiki training, came up appropriately for me to deal with it that, wow, those things happen. I can't just
Hmm.
not pretend like it didn't. I have to deal with it, you know? So it helped me to be able to, make peace with that and heal.
Exactly. What kind of experiences did you have with Reiki which impressed you much?
I've had a number of enlightenment experiences,
Hmm.
experiences with spiritual beings that
Hmm.
I had no preconceived notion about. I would like to talk about my first Reiki attunement because it
Please,
directly answers
please.
that. I talk about it in my book, The Seven Jewels, a little.
Yeah,
It came to Reiki being skeptical, but I was a spiritual person, and I was open minded. I figured, well, let me try. So I had a great experience, and then I set up a class with the people that had sponsored the Healing Arts Day at the hospital, and these people were very spiritual. They were students of Libby Barnett and Maggie Chambers. Remember that book,
hmm.
Reiki Energy Medicine?
I heard
Anyway,
about
they
that.
wrote a book that was in. They're nurses and they were in integrative medicine, and they're students of John Harvey Gray.
I see.
So they were students of that lineage, and they were very sincere, and they were also followers of Kuan Yin, the goddess Kuan Yin.
Oh,
So in
wonderful.
their healing space, there was statues of Kuan Yin, and I didn't know at the time who Kuan Yin was, other than this is an Asian lady that's very beautiful, and she's like a Buddha. That I
Hmm.
didn't know anything other than that. I didn't know her name. Well,
Hmm.
during the attunement, I started to have a vision of Kuan Yin. Um, that literally I saw her, but she was so immense, I could only see like a small fraction of her. It was like I was in her presence, but she was just immense. And I received messages about my healing path in a voice I don't know, And then it took me a half an hour to come back from the attunement. And I
Wow.
luckily they were patient. I,
Wow.
I couldn't, I was in an altered state, and it took me that long to come back. And to this day, I'm still integrating the messages and the healing that I had in that attunement. It,
Wonderful.
it was very amazing and
Mm.
a great blessing.
Yeah, I feel that. It's still, the vibe is still arising around you when you tell about that. Wow. Thank you.
Well, then later, I met a Buddhist teacher around the year 2000, I was running my school. I was living at my school, training, meditating 24/7, helping people, teaching, learning. And it just so happened that several spiritual teachers had come through my area from different traditions. I was able to meet them and receive blessings. And then for 9 months, I trained 4.5 hours every Sunday in a special program with this Buddhist teacher who's from a tradition that went from Tibet to the Himalayan mountains. And then the head teacher went to England, couldn't go back to Tibet. And he formed a worldwide organization. It's from the Kadampa tradition, very traditional, but they've made it accessible for Westerners, though very traditional. So we studied the traditional text. I received many empowerments. And so I think that kind of was an early, I'm very drawn to Buddhism and the teachings of Buddha. And that was kind of like before I even really thought about it, like an early, as you know, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are completely devoted to healing all, to leading all to enlightenment.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
think that was kind of like an early, set me on the path, let's say.
Hmm.
If that makes
Wow.
sense.
Well,
Yeah.
yes, perfectly, perfectly.
My
Um,
Buddhist teacher was also a Reiki master.
oh, great.
He was very, he used to be a bass player in a punk rock band that toured all over Europe. He
What a
sounded,
treat.
he sounded just like John Lennon, but he had a bald head and he was in the orange and saffron robes. It was always amazing learning from him because he sounded like John Lennon, but he had been through the 3 year retreat in silence. He was very serious. When he
Hmm.
met his teacher, he stopped music, he stopped everything, and became Buddhist. Um, he was an amazing person. He taught
Wow.
me a lot about Buddhism because to me it was complex and all these theories. And I went to ask him a question about some topic in Buddhism, and he just told me all there is love and healing. And then I started to go, and he just put his hands on mine, and he just looked at me and said, "All Buddha is love." And okay, that just makes it easy.
Yeah, quite understandable. So,
Yeah.
so that brings me to my last question. On the background of all these wonderful arts you studied your whole life, what is your definition, your idea of healing?
Well, there's all different levels of healing.
Hmm.
We have our physical, we have our emotions and our mind and our spiritual, but ultimately it comes down to self transformation and finding our true self, however we may think of that, and understanding that we're all part of one family.
Oh, I see. I see. That's deep.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michael. That's a wonderful, wonderful interview. And I think the people who listen to this will have lots of opportunities to understand all these things you talked about much better. And I think you have to listen, they have to listen several times to this. I will do to get all the content. So thank you
Well,
very much for coming here and for
thank
this.
you for the opportunity, Walter. And I wish you success in all that you do.
Thank you
You've
very
done
much,
so,
Mike.
done so
Same to
much to
you.
help people. Thank you. Aloha, Walter.
Aloha, Michael.